Hello, Sex Therapy 101 friends. You notice I might have taken a break, but we're back and we're excited. And I'm really passionate about this new series that I'm going to be offering to all of you. I haven't disappeared. I've been working on some projects that are really meaningful to me. And one of those is a book for the public about my research about regarding long-term outcomes of consenting to unwanted sex or duty sex, as we sometimes call it. And in doing that, adding to my own research over the year, you'll see my hair change, my face change, because these were all recorded over the course of a year. And I wanted to talk to experts about the cultural implications or cultural beliefs or the cultural ideas among different communities in the US that might protect people against negative outcomes and that might actually kind of promote people into some of the more negative outcomes. And that is the series I have to offer you. I'm really excited. It's been really meaningful to me. It's been enlightening to me. It's really helped me make sure that this book is what I want it to be for all of you. So with no ado, here we go. This is going to be the intro for the whole series. And I'll give you a little bit of a bio for each, and then we'll jump into the recording of the interview. I hope you enjoy this interview with Anne Mauro as much as I did. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified sex therapist through ASECT, as well as a clinical supervisor. She has a lot of training and she has a lot of expertise and experience. She has a private practice based out of Washington State, and she has two publications that I want to highlight. One is called More Than Ebony and Ivory, and another called Centering the Lives of Indigenous, Racialized, and People of Color in the Colonization of Black Sexualities. This is a clinical guide to relearning and healing and is a continued service to the sexuality community by serving as the ASECT Western representative, which is fantastic. I really hope you enjoy this conversation that I had with Anne. Hi, Anne.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Can you see and hear me okay?
I can. Same for you.
Yes. So I'm
Mhm,
really,
mhm.
I'm really grateful that you're willing to have this conversation, and it's really generous. I appreciate your time and your expertise and just the place you hold in the world. So right now. So thank you
Well, thank you for
so
actually
much.
doing this work because this is really a pocket that I haven't seen really talked about so much. And so I'm glad that you did that research, that you're continuing on with it with the book. And then especially grateful that you're looking at other populations, right? Because you notice that some people just kind of run with that and
Mm,
publish, but that you're doing something. I appreciate that.
hmm. Trying to. So thank you for taking the time to watch the video and learn about my research. And with your lens, because you're an expert in the world of sexuality and relationships, and you saw that research, what did you see happening? Like, how did you interpret those results or that idea?
Well, I'm interpreting it as the the unknown or unspoken variable that's probably in a lot of our work that
Mhm.
you're actually surfacing and giving language to and giving experience, to that people can resonate with and be like, "Oh yeah, right?
Yeah.
That is what I'm doing, right? I don't really want to be having sex, but I'm doing it and then I feel this feeling, right? But I don't think that people have language around that experience.
I like the language you just gave me of this is one of an unknown variable. Like it, we can, there's a dozen roads that lead to, I don't know if I want to have sex, right? And this is putting a name to one of those variables that we don't talk about. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
That was nice language.
Mm.
Um, and so then if we're taking a cultural lens,
Mhm.
someone who, comes from the Black community, works with Black community, researches rights, like this is this intersection of sexuality. Um, what are some aspects historically or even current, of Black community culture that might keep women consenting to sex they don't want?
I think that's a really good question. And I have a couple of different thoughts, but the major backdrop of what I think of as modern day American sexuality is under the umbrella of still these colonial ideas of sexuality, right? And
Mhm.
so, even if we're taking away the Black community specifically for just one moment, we have to
Yeah.
think about how we are mimicking the nuclear family structure that was imposed upon people in our area, the indigenous native people, by the English settlers who really mimicked a family structure under a common law. So it'd be somebody who is in power, a male, right, who is in power to tend and care for the wife and children, just like the state with the king was to tend to the people, as the husband is to care for the wife and the children. So putting this man into this position of power, I think is the backdrop of all of what we're seeing, right? And then if we take that lens of that colonial ideology and how historically people of color, Black people, have been treated in the realm of sexuality, where they had no autonomy over reproduction, right? They didn't have a way to consent to sexual activity. Um, I think that we have to use that as the backdrop when we're thinking about this, of where we come from historically with the patriarchy, with the race, with the anti-Blackness, with the misogynoir, right?
Yeah.
It's all embedded into the structure.
Hmm.
So that's
Hmm.
baseline.
That's baseline. Yeah.
That's the baseline part of it. Yeah. So I like what you're bringing into. We can bring in these concepts of patriarchy into all parts of this research, right? But when we're looking at the Black community, it's especially different due to the American descendants of slavery, right?
Yeah.
But also when teasing apart like what is Blackness in this study, right? That's a really big also umbrella term.
Sure.
So, have you heard the term ethno-sexuality before?
No, teach me.
It's just the intersection between race and sex,
Oh,
right? And
okay. I
so,
think I just use the whole phrase. We've got a term. Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at like Blackness and sexuality, I think we also can dig a little bit deeper in like, are they American descendants of slavery? Are they Afro-Latinx? Are they
Mhm.
Afro-Caribbean? Are they biracial Black people? Because I think too, inside of that, when we start to dig through different messaging that different groups of people are getting, we're going to see different subsets within the Black community
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right.
that are going to contribute to why we've been able to kind of perpetuate this consensual, unwanted sexual activity, right? Because of different messages that come from the different subsets of people.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So, again, with that historical component, women have not been in a position where they can speak for their own wants and desires, right? There's a real selflessness that comes under that, right?
Hmm.
And depending on what pocket of Black folks we're talking about, but Christian supremacy reigns superior within the Black community, right? And so
Yeah.
thinking about how that mimics in the family structure, that colonial idea of the man is on top, right? And we are subservient to whatever desires that they have, and we need to be obedient to this person at the
Hmm.
sacrifice of ourselves, no matter what that looks like.
Hmm.
Um, and, also culturally speaking, I don't think that we're talking a lot about sex presently or historically. It's not within, community. We're not talking about sex in church unless it's like premarital counseling, it might come in. We're not talking to our children. We're not talking to our parents. So there's just like this hush around sexuality, knowing that there's some kind of dominance and control happening, but we're not actually in a place to have language or talk about it within the communities.
Hmm. Hmm.
So then I have another one. I think mass media contributes to everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like not just the Black folks. When we think about how the media really impacts us through social learning, right? We are learning all kinds of implicit messages on how to treat each other. We're learning, and also it's a good reminder to say, historically and majority now present day, all of the people that are in charge of the media are white cis men in how they want to portray Black bodies in films. They might say, "Oh, this is a Black film," but you think, "Who's the writer?
Mm,
Who's the producer of this?" Right? And a lot of times
mm,
you will find that there's white people behind creating the narratives around sexuality. Um, so that's like with just the general media, right? It's not a very good model for us in thinking about consent and boundaries or putting women in positions of sexual empowerment to make their own sexual decisions. It's really not, I'm an 80s baby, so it was like almost non-existent.
oh
I have
yeah.
11-year-old now, but I watch TV with her and I'm like, they just had a consent conversation before they, did anything. I'm loving how they're starting to implement it,
Mm,
but depending on your age, you can really see how the media, has impacted your ideas around boundaries, consent,
yeah.
autonomy over your body.
Hmm.
So that's the media part. And if we trickle down to erotica or pornography, as a lot of people say, I don't think people really are grounded in the fact that I have a stat here. It says sex education was the primary reason um, that BIPOC teenagers and young adults viewed pornography. This is coming from Caroline West. She's out here from in Tacoma, Washington. She came from UW. So
Hmm.
the main reason BIPOC teenagers are watching pornography is for sex education.
They want the
So
education.
they
Yeah.
want the education, but unfortunately, what they're seeing again is white cis males who
Mm,
are funding, producing, directing. And we know that that Black, Latina, and Asian women have a higher likelihood of being featured in physical aggression
yeah.
more than their white counterparts, right? And so
Mhm.
there's this implicit I feel like it's a holdover from the colonial days that we can treat Black and brown women a certain way.
Certain
It
way.
may not, like we talked about earlier, be in that cognitive, forefront of the mind. There's like these implicit messages that are just so insidious in our culture that we adopt that as a learning theory. Even if you're like,
Hmm.
I'm not racist, have our biases that we are
Sure.
actually gaining from what we're watching all the time. And so, also in pornography, BIPOC men were disproportionately depicted as the aggressors in pornography, right? And so, if you're learning, then you're learning that I need to be the aggressor. I need to level up and demonstrate what I'm seeing to be a good lover or to be good in bed. And the problem too with this is that what you're missing in the pornography is those consent conversations that might happen before or the aftercare
Mhm.
that happens after. We're only getting that aggressive piece of pornography without any context
And
to it.
no range of expression. It sounds like, real just
Yes,
staying on the
right.
aggressive without seeing a whole range of sexual expression that might not include aggression.
Right. And on that, here's another one that Wes comes up with. She says that compared to white couples, Black men and women demonstrated less intimacy in pornography, defined as kissing, using the other person's name, caressing, having intercourse face to face, and talking to each other during sex. So we're
Mm,
creating a whole population of kiddos coming up underneath us, getting their education, viewing this and learning that, right? This is how you do sex, right?
mhm.
In this aggressive way, in this taking what you want, and there's a lack of intimacy when it comes to the Black body part. So what I think is it's normalizing a certain kind of violence or another type of patriarchal rule over the female body with these implicit messages of taking and violence and consent doesn't matter, boundaries don't matter, aggression, all of that is just kind of interwoven into the pornography.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then when we step outside of porn and look at just real life, w- we know that for every Black woman that reports a rape, there's 15 that don't.
Is that the statistic?
Yes.
I think I've only heard the general, I don't think I've heard it broken down by demographic, right? It's like the
Yes.
1 in 3 or whatever, but that's staggering.
Well, and think about like what we're talking about. Like there's systems and structures in
Mhm.
place to maintain this violence because we're not talking about it, right?
Mhm.
We don't feel safe to go to the law. We don't feel safe to tell our friend, "Hey, this thing happened." And then we don't have common knowledge where a friend turns and says, "Hey, that's not
Mhm.
okay,"
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Because sometimes we're actually normalizing the behavior. Oh, just
True,
give him what he wants. Just do,
true,
keep having sex and make him happy,
true.
right? Instead
Mhm.
of the other person turning and saying, "Hey, this actually isn't right, and let's talk about, how we can make this better for you." We put women in a position to suffer. So with that stat, so it's the 1 in 5 Black women have been raped, but 2 out of 5 have been survivors of some sort of physical violence, sexual violence, or a rape. So those are the numbers again, just normalizing this bottom down position, this sexual subservient space that Black bodies are supposed to be in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And it's not the thing that's standing out to me is it's not staying a historical idea because of where education is coming from and that entertainment being produced to consume, it's not going to like age out these ideas, right? It's not like they're going to age out with the next generation because they're being promoted.
Not at the rate that we are right now, right? It would
Yeah.
take some pretty big, drastic changes, I think, for
Mhm.
it to improve. When this
Mhm.
is the only place that they are getting education. And when we think about right now, there's threats to sex education being in curriculum, there's threats to critical race theory being
Yeah.
in curriculum. And we see already from this talk today is that there's a direct link in between what has happened historically and where we are here now with the sexuality. But that being omitted from education is omitted from common knowledge, right? And so it's almost this
Right.
gaslighting effect if you can recognize that the harm is being done.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, it's not fantastic that it's happening, but thank you for teaching me because it's fantastic that we can open our eyes a little bit at a time, more and more and more, to see the systemic things that keep churning dynamics that are not helpful for any of us,
Mhm.
not healthy. Did you have additional thoughts before I go to the next one? I don't want to
No, I think
rush
that's good
you
on
or,
that one.
okay. What about then certain aspects of, community values, norms, beliefs that might protect or might, challenge the idea and might help women to not consent to to sex that they don't want, like protective factors?
Yeah, the first thing that I thought of when I read that was the Me Too movement, right?
Mm,
Because it's a matriarchal, it's women led by Black women, originated for Black voices and other AFAB bodies.
mhm,
But if you look at it, it looks more around like sexual assault, right? That sexual trauma, and not so much what that. I'm going to call it a trauma, what that trauma is within intimate relationships, that your committed relationship when that's happening,
mm,
right? So that's why,
mhm,
again, I'm not hearing anybody talking about that piece, but I felt like that movement, something where we could have recognition from other Black women or women of color talking to women of color about what is being seen, like your work,
mhm,
right? With a Black lens put on it, being delivered to the Black community so we can have it as a common knowledge and shared
mm.
language, I think would be really, really helpful. I can't change this, but new media resources, right?
Okay,
Like, I don't know if
say
you've
more.
seen
Say more.
um, for example, because like I said, in the 80s is when I grew up, and you would have a woman who would say no, and the guy would be like, yes, and she'd be like, no, and even slap him. And then all of a sudden they're kissing, making out, and having, and it's really confusing messaging, but right, it's like your no doesn't actually matter. But
It's
my
part of the
kiddo is
game or part of the chase or part of the, yeah,
right.
yeah.
So watching films with my kiddo who's 11, she's loves Heartstopper right now. Have you seen Heartstopper?
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
Okay, so it's queer, but they have one black trans girl on there who starts her dating journey. And in that, she's able to really articulate, you get to see what comes up for her in sexual scenarios somatically. You see her then communicate to her partner about what is going on. And
Wow.
you see him holding any kind of boundaries and asking for consent to do
Wow.
anything past or even adjacent to something she may have mentioned that was uncomfortable for her. That didn't happen when I was a kiddo.
No, no, we
So if we
didn't
could
see that.
have more people making films like this, right? Because if they're getting it from porn, they're getting it from TV, they're not getting it from their parents, they're not getting it from their church, right? So if this is what they're actually getting and learning about relationship, then we have to switch mass media and how we're looking at sex. That's
Mm-hmm.
not perpetuating the harm.
Yeah, yeah.
That's one thought. Um, I think too that women gaining access to leadership roles, opportunities within even sports, right? Sports is very patriarchal, right? They let us have a couple things, right? Um, but not even all sports, right? And then they'll let us have a sport, but they don't put us on primetime TV, right? You might
Mhm.
not even get the channel that plays your niece who's playing professional basketball. It'll be really hard to actually watch her unless you buy that extra package for women's sports, right?
Oh, yeah.
We got we have so many different Fox or not Fox things Fox Sports, but we have so many different sports channels that are just carved out for men's sports, right? Whoopi
Mhm.
Goldberg of all people is now opening her own channel that will only be showing women's sports on that channel 24/7. So
Really?
it's that
That's
kind
awesome.
of visibility, right? Putting
Yeah.
us in positions where we can be strong, we can be empowered, we don't have to be subservient, we are equal to. But we get mixed messages when we can't really
Mm.
be at the same level. There's always a hierarchy over. So I feel like when we can start moving into these different positions of power that can be seen by younger people, then that can build some of that sexual self-esteem because it's not being modeled that you're subservient. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, and I'm hearing you say what might have to happen before just these sexual assertiveness skills is developing them in all areas of our life so that it's natural, it's common sense, it's this is how I live my life. It's like rejecting the subservient nature in all areas
Hmm.
will probably make it easier than to reject subservientness in a sexual context instead of
Hmm.
my lens, instead of just looking at it so narrow of how do we empower women to say what they want sexually? Why would they sexually if they couldn't professionally? Or
Hmm.
that's what I'm hearing you say. Those are where my mind's going from what you're teaching
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. And another thing I think about is when working with kiddos in sex ed, right? Like a lot of people are like, how do we help kiddos? Like, use the right language and do all this. And it's like, yeah, but what happens if this kiddo that you just did brilliant sex ed work goes home and tells her mom, oh, it's not a vagina, it's a vulva. And her mom clutches her pearls and like, right? You're putting her again into like this gaslighting chamber, right? Where I'm learning
Mhm.
something about myself, but then you're setting me back into this dysfunctional way of thinking about sex and bodies. And how do I exist in that world when the world is telling me it's one way, but maybe I learned something else? So maybe if you do it on an individual level, there's still in that insidious nature of all these messages saying something different
Yeah.
because it's the backdrop. Not to be a Debbie Downer.
They're serious subjects. So
Right, right.
they feel like downers often.
They do. They do. When this comes to like the Black population specifically, is we don't really have models of people talking about ethno-sexuality in sitcoms or in movies in a healthy way, right? We hear jokes, we get teased, we have microaggressions, right? But
Mm-hmm.
we're not getting those lessons built into the media.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think psychoeducation is super important, right? I keep talking about even having that language, right? Even explaining somatically what happens to your body when you're uncomfortable with something, I think
Mm-hmm.
is really big. And I think in teaching the Black community about it, I thought about doing it with like stories or examples, right? Bringing in something that they can resonate instead of this fact is this fact. It's like, no, let's do some storytelling around it so we can personalize it and have some empathy and, and kind of feel that validating, like, oh yeah, right. We need to feel that
Mm-hmm.
story rather than be given the facts, is what I also feel, and which I feel like media could do so much with, since they're the
Mm-hmm.
storytellers. They're narrating,
Yeah.
our
Mm-hmm.
era. I think another piece that is really big is just normalizing and validating that there has been either sexual boundary crossing or having sex when you didn't want to, and that can make you feel away, right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
think we sit long enough to be like, wow, you know what I mean? You did something that didn't feel good to your body, and that makes sense. I
Yeah.
understand why that wouldn't feel like even sitting in that, because it's that gaslighting again, like, oh, just give him what he wants. Oh, just, maybe open your relationship so you don't have to be the one responsible instead of actually sitting in that feeling of what it has been like for the last 10 years. And then to just now have your eyes open to this is what was happening for the last 10 years. You didn't know it. Your
Right.
body knew it, but your cognitions didn't know it. The other piece that I'll add into this, which will be the last piece, is actually that communication skills building,
Mm-hmm.
teaching people how to communicate those things because we don't have the language around it. We don't know how to language. A lot of AFAB folks can't one, if you ask, like, what do you want? What do you desire? They can't drum that up from within themselves, right?
Mhm.
And then when we
That's
get
what
to a
it
spot,
was. Yes, yes,
okay, you got
yes.
it? Go,
That's
go
where it
for
was.
it.
That we pedestalize the sacrifice and say, no, that makes you good. And then
Mm-hmm,
women saying, but why don't I feel good? Right?
mm-hmm,
After I'm subservient sexually, like it's supposed to be good. It's supposed to be what's
mm-hmm,
praised in this patriarchal structure. And depending on how much influence there is from family or church, then and then that conflicting with what you just said of listening to your feelings, but why don't I feel good? Into your
mm-hmm.
body, that retrospective. We don't stop. That was the thought.
It's hard for folks to kind of feel that for themselves, but then if they get to a spot where they can say, I really don't want to have sex after, we were at the Mariner game for 10 hours, right? And coming
Mm-hmm.
home, right? If they can actually, one, figure that out for themselves, right? And then the other hard part is how do I actually tell my partner this without him? I think one of your vignettes was like the husband maybe had a hissy fit or acted, like a baby, or you know what I mean? Like, how do we communicate in a way that's going to be receptive that our partner hears and has empathy for rather than again belittles us or gives us a pout or whatever it is to make us feel
Mm-hmm.
guilty for actually standing up for what we want for ourselves and our body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Big
Yeah,
missing chunk. How do we
huge
communicate
missing
that?
chunk.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And no modeling for the other partner of how to receive that. Well, thank you so much for being honest to me. I want our sexual relationship to be mutually enjoyable. I'm so glad you trust me with that. I'm sure that's hard to say. I know you don't want to
Hmm.
disappoint me. Those kinds of things. Nobody's
Hmm.
modeling accepting a no graciously without creating distance, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
No, it's like they're activated sometimes in their own resent or rejection, right? This rejection sensitivity of sometimes some people feel like they're owed that. Like we're in a partnership, you owe this to me. We're married, you owe this to me, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
again, with psychoeducation, that relationship doesn't mean ownership.
Did you coin that phrase? That was beautiful. You're really great with language.
I'm glad. Okay, we need to make a t-shirt, and I already forgot what I said.
You have a background like I do in marriage and family therapy. We're both AAMFT supervisor. I mean, that's kind of our world is a systemic lens. If this couple lands on your couch, what do you see is going to be helpful for them? You've already described some of it, but you've got, the man obviously hurting, the woman obviously avoidant and anxious, and sex hasn't been going well for years, and you're like, start to realize, oh, you've been consenting to quite a bit of sex that you don't want. That probably isn't helpful
Mhm,
for your desire. What do you do with your training, your lens? Where are you going to go, this
mhm.
couple?
I think probably in my like early assessment pieces, I might be able to pull out some of those insidious messages, right? Or at least,
Mhm.
even from looking at when this person was born and what media they were exposed to, right? Because I really like to just drop that seed with folks. So maybe you don't know how media or porn has impacted your relationship that you have right now, but I want you now that I'm talking about it to just start paying attention. Let's start seeing what models, what possibility models you're seeing around sexuality, right? And then that kind of create some openness for them to pay attention to how they've been socialized around sex with that media piece. So I feel like just a little psychoeducation of, that social learning, how, some of the things I've told you about how the media is controlled and how they talk about relationships. Let's just kind of set that, you know, drop a little seed, set that down, let them resonate in that for a little while we continue to do this work. Um, and then I think coming from like a trauma informed lens, one of the first stops I think I would be at is looking at somatic attunement.
Mm,
Does the partner, right, know what's going on with their body? Can they identify? Sometimes, just for simplicity's sake, in the beginning of therapy, I draw a thermometer and I have that green, that yellow, maybe burnt orange, and red. And we're just getting to know, those different states that our body can be in. And I have them check in every once in a while and see what's going on and tell me, where are you normally riding at, right? And when you all are spending time together, where are you riding at? So that's like that individual attunement. And then I bring in this other piece when we start talking about sex is what is the partner noticing? Are you
mhm,
noticing that she is not into it? Or are you just like going in and having a good time and have no idea what this person's experience is? And then if you are noticing, what are you noticing? Well, I notice that she tenses up like this. I notice that a vein happens like this. I notice that she won't look at me, right?
mhm,
There's different cues. Okay, so you saw that cue, then what are you doing with that cue? Some people, like, I just try to get done and finish, or I stop, right? And then, and so just having that understanding of what's going on in my own body, what am I visually seeing happening in my partner, and hopefully sometimes that even brings empathy, right?
yeah.
If you see it and then maybe you haven't been saying for a long time, oh, I see her, even have a tear come down. She says everything's fine and to keep going, but there's this tear going down and I'm trying to keep going,
Mm,
right? And it's just kind of getting an idea into the actual cycle.
yeah.
I need to know, is there awareness? Is there no awareness at all with the
Right.
partner having sex with your body when you're not really into it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then kind of working from that little point right there.
And those are conversations maybe they've never had of analyzing the script of their normal sexual encounter, right? Because we're not talking about at home, not talking about at church, not talking about at school. When we go to the therapy office, we have to think for the first time, what I do that, and then they do that, and then I and I feel like this,
Mhm,
and they feel like that's huge. It's so new to slow that down and really think
mhm,
about it. Yeah.
mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, and so what I try to have clients do is to stay within that window of tolerance, right? So if we feel ourselves creeping up into that yellow part, we have to do an intervention on ourselves. We have to make sure that if we're gonna, use this is the brain, right? I tell them you can't make sexual decisions when you're activated. So we need to make sure before you creep up into activation mode that you can slow down, do your, whatever it is that you do, your breathing, because when we can slow that down, then you can have discernment. If you have to slow down, have discernment, do I want to do this? Yes or no, right? And if
Right.
it's no, then we know that you're hiking up on again into a different color, and we need to stay within our window of tolerance.
I love how you phrase that because I've worked with couples before who said, well, she calms down and so we can go again. And you're like, no, we calm down so we can have discernment, not so we can keep going. We need to have a conversation. We
Mhm.
need to have
Mhm.
some, we need to, I love just how you use that discernment, that's why we're
Mhm.
calming down, not so we can keep going without her having a panic attack or whatever the thing is. Yeah.
Mhm. Discernment, and then we'll follow it up with consent. We're waiting for that enthusiastic, yes, I want to
Hmm.
continue, not,
Yeah.
okay, my nervous system calmed down enough for you to continue to do that thing that makes me
Yeah.
uncomfortable again.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'll do too is I'll take my vulva puppet and with that trauma, idea, and I give some psychoeducation around um, literally, I try to do this as tender as I can, but the way like a medical field would think about sex, right? Like
Hmm.
is an actual trauma. This is a trauma, right? Even just hitting it around is a what in the medical field is a trauma.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so when you have that trauma, your body starts to protect you from that trauma. So, right, I show my vulva pillow, right? And then when you're trying to get in there, it's just like this tightness, right? And
Hmm.
so if there's ever this tightness, then we're not having sex. That's not what we're doing. We come up with a list of how are we going to co-regulate, or is it just individual regulation that we need? But what are we going to do, right? Because all you're doing is telling your body that when this starts to happen, then we got to do this,
Hmm.
right? And so
Hmm.
explaining to them that trauma response, and then like that opening up like a flower, if it's a yes, then you want, then breathing into your body, relaxing your body because of that brain body connection, right? And so your body might be telling your brain we need to freak out, or your brain's telling your body you got to freak out. We have to be in that green and open if that's what we want to be doing. And if you see, if it's the cis het partner, if you see your partner doing this isn't the time to even try to do that, right? It's the
Right.
locked door now. We
Yeah.
need the open door.
Right. Right. I've never seen someone use their vulva pillow that way. It was fantastic to see you represent like what happens with vaginismus, but also just the clench response. We don't have to have
Mhm.
vaginismus to brace down to protect ourselves. That's just so instinctual to brace down, and
Mhm.
not conducive at all to consensual, mutually enjoyable sex.
Mm-mm. You're just kind of
Mhm.
perpetuating at least that somatic experience, even when maybe no threat is there.
Mhm.
How can we say yes and be enthusiastic when our body keeps on doing that? Because
Mhm.
that's what we've continued to let happen for the last 10 years in
Mhm.
the relationship.
And we frame it as something going wrong, but I'm hearing you say this is
Mhm.
something going right. This is what happens when there's a danger. This is what our body is designed to do to help us. And so we have to work with that idea of needing safety for it to open up instead of just thinking there's something going wrong, just muscle through, just, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's my buy-in of why you don't muscle through, is because you're just perpetuating that tension when we really need relaxation.
Absolutely.
Also, I just wrote down that deconstructing those colonial narratives attached to sex and relationship. I do that quite a bit in, history lesson or little, whatever I can do here and there. And, just like in sex therapy, we learn a lot about where people get these messages, and we give them the space to say, is this something you want to hold on to? Or is this something you
Mhm.
want to get rid of? And that's the same with how we're thinking about some of this colonial hangover in sex and relationship. Is
Mm,
it really important for this relationship that it does adhere to a patriarchal model and that's what they both feel comfortable with? And I have to work within that, right? But at least I'm giving some education. I'm trying to see where we can make some movement in detangling some of these larger messages and how they're infiltrating into the
mhm.
dutiful wife or whatever's happening
Yeah.
in that moment.
And making it a conscious choice instead of just an implicit belief, bringing it to the awareness
Mhm.
of, are you both choosing this?
Hmm. It's something that I don't do with my clients, but something that a lot of my supervisees do, which I thought would be good here, is using like Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent or like the 3 minute game. Have other folks brought
Yeah.
that into the space?
No, but I've thought of that too, that that would absolutely be something we do here. Go ahead and talk about it because I'm
Well, that's
interested in your
all.
thoughts too.
Just
Yeah.
as a tangible intervention of what it actually looks like, that giving and that receiving, right? That being
Mhm.
able to ask and say, right, what is okay, what you're okay with, I think are
Mhm.
big steps. And when we think about like what specific interventions do we have across the board that people have access to, that's the one that comes to mind.
Yeah, yeah. I love her work. I'm so happy to see it growing and her publishing a book and everything. And I think a cool part is also understanding what touches for you and what touches for your partner.
Mhm.
In the way that you brought up, the stereotypes in porn of people of color, um, to be able to have that skill of attunement in the way that you were describing of even if I am reaching out to touch my partner, it can sometimes be for me, not for them, but I see a lot of
Mhm.
couples saying, I'm doing this for you. But if they don't like what you're doing, it's not for them. So,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, it also made me think of something else that I do too, is just kind of mapping people's sexual script
hmm
so we can see where on that timeline is is it really unwanted? Is it in the very beginning, right with that first initiation? Or is it with that touch that he's giving me that he thinks I want and I just can't say I really don't? I don't like that. That's too hard and I'm not going to say that. And that's when that period of now I don't want to do it happens, right? But if we can get like that whole script kind of laid out, right? We can kind of map out where it's happening and then again bring in the partner. Are you seeing it happening here? Right? How much insight do you have to the cycle that's happening? And after that, of course, you have a lot more insight into the cycle.
Yeah, yeah. Because we don't learn a lot if someone says, I don't like sex or she never wants to have sex. That we don't learn very much from that statement, right?
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
That I like that idea. That's new, a little bit new to me. I've thought about, checking how's she feeling before, during, and after, but to be able to identify it's when these things happen that I switch from enthusiastic and consent to, I'd rather not be doing this. You know,
Mhm.
you've talked a little bit about this, but what do you see as the answer of preventing this for younger women?
I, 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 I did touch on it, but I do think we need like collective acknowledgement.
Okay.
Right now, this isn't a shared acknowledgement that we have, right? Like you've busted open something, but it's not common knowledge, right? And
Hmm.
that's what we needed to be understood by everyone and as a common knowledge for us to stand on first,
To say this isn't
right?
helpful. Yeah.
Yes,
This,
right.
mhm,
This isn't the
there's
way we should be having sex.
there's negative outcomes if this is a long-standing pattern.
That's better said. Yes,
Hmm.
right. But that right now, that's not common knowledge.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think that it is.
Mm-mm.
I think once we hear it, we all go, "Oh, hell yeah."
Right, right. So it's
Yeah.
that communal acknowledgement, the communal healing, just like the Me Too movement. I think a lot of people can do so much work in the individual therapy session, but we also need that from our sisters, our aunties, our other women that we're in community with to also have that shared common ground that we can, because we get gaslit. Like I said, we get gaslit out of the experience, but we need everybody to be on the same page so we can normalize and have that healing actually start. Because if you find out in individual therapy, then you go out into the world and they're telling you you're crazy, just
Mhm.
put up with it, right? It's again that push and pull what is holding back that actual healing, not just
Mhm.
for the individual, but for us collectively, right?
Mhm.
Also, I think it would be really important because I don't do like premarital therapy. If anything, I've done some pre-commitment work before around sex. But how profound would it be if even the churches added a component of this into their pre-commitment um, therapy modality, right? If it was just a part of this manualized, we're going to hit this part so everybody in church knows.
I'm only smiling because I'm imagining trying to sell this to the church and
Mm-hmm.
imagining the kind of resistance um, that it might provoke, you know?
It is possible, right? And so I always like to
Mhm.
start with the least resistant, right?
Mhm.
If you can give the leader of the church some concrete data like you've already produced, right? And then explain to them what is happening in their heart. They don't want their members to be suffering. And
Mhm.
also adding, when I'm thinking about like general therapists, like an LMFT, they only get 3 to 5 credits of human sexuality, right? And then they're trying to treat sexological issues. And sometimes when it comes to theology, it's almost worse,
Mhm.
right? Because it's not a lot of times that sex positive education that's actually making it into that 3 to 5 credits. So
Right.
offering them the tools that they need to be informed, I think with that insight, they would only want to, not everybody, but they would only want to help in this part where they're just lacking some knowledge.
Mhm. Mhm. Tell me your thoughts, this is question 6, about this dynamic we're discussing and how it interplays with a diagnosis of hypoactive desire or interest disorder. Like,
Yeah, I
of
had I
is this low desire or is this something else? These women.
well, I pulled out my DSM to really be like, let me
Let me
really
see.
I got it out here. I actually had the
Nice.
page open. I shut it for to make some space.
Oh, nice.
But it kind of reminds me of, let's just think about like race and trauma, right? There's no racial trauma, but we have the trauma. We can see
Mhm.
where maybe it fits in. We don't have complex PTSD, but we can see where it fits in. So it could be built into the diagnostic features. I feel like associated feature supporting diagnosis, right? They
Okay.
always are brushing on relational factors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So another part that I thought it could go into is the risk and well, I can't say the word now, factors, but
Mm-hmm.
it does a subcategory of environmental. So environmental factors include relationship difficulties. So yes, this is a relationship difficulty, but that is such a broad term that's not breaking it down into, right, this unwanted piece of sex.
Mm-hmm. That
So I think
unknown
that,
variable that you mentioned. Yeah. Yeah.
right. And so I think that we could, like a lot of times we use this and we know all these other parts of why, this person has depression or this person has anxiety and those criteria aren't in the DSM. It feels like it could fit here, right? But we just know the added information to the context of why it's there.
True. It doesn't say your mom under depression,
Right.
but it, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But
That
it gives
makes
you the
sense.
wiggle room, though, right? Of
Uh-huh.
coming
Uh-huh.
to that justification by several times just saying relational issues. It's all over in this, but what
Mhm.
what does that I mean, they're not defining it.
Right.
So they're leaving it broad enough for us to throw it in there is what I
Mm-hmm.
feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because
then that
so often the
oh yeah.
woman self-diagnosed herself with I have a desire disorder, or that, or the partner has, or, and trying to figure out where does context and dynamic interplay with diagnosis, that was great. I like how you
Mhm.
saw that and how you
And
viewed
then it
that.
gives you another piece too with the culture related diagnostic issues, right? If
Mm-hmm.
we did
Hmm.
bring in some of the pieces we talked today about specifically Black bodies, right? We could add it into that piece. And then also gender related diagnostic features.
Hmm.
Well, the gender is that we are in a massively patriarchal society, which has a stronghold on human sexuality in modern day, right?
Yeah,
So it's just all this wiggling to maneuver, which I feel like diagnosing is a lot of the
it is.
times.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Do you have additional thoughts? Your op-ed kind of commentary that I might, things that you thought of that I didn't think to ask.
We all collectively need to have a basic understanding of how anti-Black our society is, and that misogynoir is at the forefront of this, right? That hatred against Black women is they're not getting the support, they're not getting the resources, they're
Mm-hmm.
not getting that communal healing, right, that they need. They're always getting pushed down, doing the most labor and getting the push down
Yeah.
for the support. And so whatever interventions or whatever, conceptualizations we have to think, we have to put that at the forefront when
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at working with Black women, that is the context, that is the backdrop of
Mm-hmm.
their experience.
Mm-hmm. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as far as research goes, we're just starting to do that. We're just starting to say, hey, does this intervention, this actually Gottman intervention we've been doing with white folks all the time, does it translate well? And they're starting to do some of that, of what interventions and what changes need to be made culturally.
And I think again, this is all saying that white people are at the forefront of making decisions for Black people's healing. And instead of
Mhm.
trying to mold a white model to, Black folks, why
Mhm.
don't we give Black clinicians the space to create interventions for
Mhm.
us? Why don't we get the funding or the support to talk about how we can create healing within our own communities? But we're on the pedestal of looking at white folks and then trying to mold it to work for us,
Thanks for
right? But
pointing
we're
that out.
not
Yeah.
not giving Black people the voice to say, hey, this is what we actually need. We're waiting for the white dude to tell us what we
Mm.
can have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks for pointing that out. That's true. I'm going through in my mind interventions and who created them. They're all older white men,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. So the problem that a lot of like BIPOC like within ASEC community is a lot of our supervisees come to us like, well, then what is the answer? What do we do? It's like, well, we're tired right now.
Mm-hmm.
We can't
Mm-hmm.
recreate this wheel, but this is for those that younger cohort that we're bringing in
Mm-hmm.
to create, right? We're giving them those tools to start to have that space because historically, right, it's very ableist, cis, white, couple centric is the only way you got your foot in the door. But we have the responsibility of letting that younger cohort get a foot in the door so they can create.
Are you seeing that cohort grow?
Yes. I feel like even the cohort before me bust the door open. I got to walk through, and now these other
Mm.
folks are going to be tearing it up. I believe
Nice.
so.
Oh, good. Awesome. So sometimes when we're talking about systemic change, it feels so long, but I'm so glad to hear you say that this part of the systemic change you're seeing happen
I'm
without
seeing it
taking
happen, but we
decades.
haven't
Yeah.
created, right? We don't
Yeah.
have,
Okay.
as many different models, as many different
Mhm.
experts whose names are accessible to people's mouths, right? Like
Right.
Emily Nagoski, Esther Perel, we know, people who are not in the sex world know that, but ask, them who is a Black sexologist who is doing this work, it's going to be harder for them to retrieve a name.
Mm-hmm.
We need to
Mm-hmm.
make it more accessible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I appreciate your time. I'm really pleased to meet you. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to meet you and thank you for doing the work.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Okay,
Okay,
bye-bye.
thanks. Bye, Anne.